I don't know if you've ever felt it, that tiny flicker of hope when you think you're about to be included. You know, when you hear laughter from the other room, voices rising like they're making plans, and for a moment you think, maybe, they'll ask me to come along. That was me, standing there, coat already draped over my arm, waiting for my son to say the words, "Come on, Mom, we're going out, grab your shoes." But instead, he looked at me, then at the others, and with this half grin, not cruel, just careless, he said, "We voted. You're not coming with us. Old people belong at home watching TV." And just like that, my whole body froze. At first, I honestly thought he was joking. I even laughed, this awkward little laugh, waiting for the "just kidding" to follow. But no one corrected him. No one laughed with me. The room just kind of shifted, like the air got heavier. My daughter-in-law avoided eye contact. The grandkids were already rushing for their jackets. And there I was, standing by the door with my coat, realizing this wasn't a joke, that it's strange how quickly a moment can collapse on you. 1 second you're part of something, the next you're just extra. Like a prop someone forgot to put away. I remember touching the door frame, the cold wood pressing into my palm, just to steady myself. My mind was racing. Did he really just say that? Did my son, my own son, decide I wasn't wanted? But I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I felt the words knotting in my throat, too heavy to push out. Instead, I watched. I watched them shuffle into their coats, check their phones, laugh about where they were going. All while I stood there, invisible in plain sight. I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror, coat still hanging over my arm, like some pitiful sign of how wrong I'd been. And honestly, I hated the look on my own face. That mix of hope and embarrassment, like a child who wasn't picked for the game. When the door finally shut behind them, the house went quiet. Too quiet. I swear, even the ticking of the clock sounded louder, sharper, almost mocking, and there I was. Alone. No invitation. No, we'll be back soon. Just me, the silence, and the echo of his words burning in my ears. Old people belong at home watching TV. It wasn't just what he said. It was the way it felt, like a verdict. Like they'd all taken a vote and decided my chapter in their story was already finished. And in that moment, I realized something I never wanted to believe. Sometimes, the people you've given your whole heart to can look right at you and not see you at all. You know what's funny? It wasn't even the words themselves that hurt the most. It was the way they hung in the air afterward, like smoke you can't wave away. I kept replaying them in my head, over and over. We voted. You're not coming with us. Old people belong at home watching TV. At first, I thought maybe he'd glance back at me, wink, soften it with a laugh. But he didn't. My son, the same boy who used to cling to my leg on the first day of school, the same kid who once begged me to stay an extra 5 minutes at bedtime, didn't even flinch. He just zipped up his jacket like nothing had happened. And me? I stood there, stunned, as though someone had pulled the floor out from under me. The worst part? Nobody defended me. Not one person. My daughter-in-law kept fiddling with her scarf, pretending to be busy. The grandkids, bless their hearts, were too young to even notice. And me? I was left holding my own silence, choking on it. That I wanted to say something, anything, to call him out, to remind him I wasn't some piece of old furniture taking up space. But the words wouldn't come. My throat tightened, my lips parted, and then nothing. Just a shaky breath that probably made me look even weaker. It's strange how silence can be louder than shouting. Because in that silence, I heard everything he didn't say. That I was too slow. That I'd embarrassed them. That I wasn't worth the trouble of bringing along. The room suddenly felt smaller, like the walls themselves were pressing in. The laughter bouncing between them wasn't for me anymore. It was something I was excluded from. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just left out of a dinner or a movie or wherever they were going. I was being left out of their lives. Flashback. I still remember one Sunday years ago. We'd all gone to the beach. My son, probably 10 at the time, begged me to race him along the shoreline. I remember his tiny feet splashing through the water, his laugh echoing in the wind. He kept turning back, waving me to keep up. "Come on, Mom. Don't stop." Back then, he couldn't imagine going anywhere without me. Now, decades later, he couldn't imagine going anywhere with me. When the door closed and I was left in the echo of their departure, it hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just rejection. It was dismissal. And that stings in a way I can't quite explain. like being erased, little by little, until one day they won't even notice you're gone. I sat down on the edge of the couch, coat still on my lap, staring at the blank television screen. And I thought, is this what I've been reduced to? A background character in my own family. That night, I didn't cry. Not yet. Crying would have felt like admitting he was right. Instead, I just sat there, numb, with his words circling in my head, sharper each time they came back. That it's strange how the mind works. When you feel unwanted in the present, your heart almost instinctively runs back to the past, to the times when you knew, without question, that you were needed. That night, sitting there with nothing but the silence and the glow of the untouched TV screen, my mind started to wander. I found myself drifting back to 100 little moments, ones I hadn't thought about in years. That I remembered Sunday mornings when the kids were small. The smell of pancakes filling the kitchen, little hands tugging at my apron, their voices overlapping as they fought over who got the first stack. My son always won, not because he was older, but because he was the loudest. I used to laugh and call him my morning thunder. I remembered birthday parties too, balloons taped to the wall, the cheap plastic tablecloths with cartoon characters on them. My son's face lighting up when the cake came out. His eyes would always dart straight to me, searching for approval, making sure I was watching when he blew out the candles. And the road trips. God, the road trips. Windows down, music blasting from the crackling car radio. The kids singing off-key in the back seat, and me sneaking glances in the mirror, thinking, this is it. This is what happiness looks like. Those memories used to feel warm. Now they hurt. Because they're proof that somewhere along the way, I went from being the center of their world to being an afterthought. That it's not just about missing those days. It's about realizing that they'll never come back. That the little boy who once begged me to stay close now casts votes to keep me behind. Sometimes I wonder if they even remember those moments the way I do. Or if they've been buried under years of busyness, distractions, and the kind of indifference that creeps in slowly. So slowly you don't notice until it's too late. Yes, I sat there, the smell of pancakes. And the sound of birthday candles blowing out felt so close, I almost reached for them. But when I opened my eyes, all I saw was the dim reflection of myself in the black TV screen. Alone, older, left behind, and maybe that's what hurt the most. Realizing that those memories meant everything to me, and maybe nothing to them anymore. I whispered out loud, though no one was there to hear it. Do you even remember? Do you remember who I was to you? The silence that followed answered me in its own way. When the door clicked shut behind them, I swear the sound echoed longer than it should have. It wasn't just the sound of a lock sliding into place. It was the sound of finality. A reminder that, for the rest of the night, the laughter and conversation would exist somewhere else, and I wouldn't be part of it. The house grew quiet. Not peaceful quiet, the kind that settles into your chest and makes you feel heavier. The kind of quiet that makes every small sound stand out like a siren. The tick-tick-tick of the clock on the wall, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, even the soft creak of the wooden floor under my feet when I shifted in my chair. It all felt amplified, like the house was mocking me with its emptiness. I sat there for a while, coat still over my lap. I couldn't even bring myself to hang it back up in the closet. Doing that would have meant admitting I was never going anywhere. That this silence, this stillness, was exactly where I was meant to stay. I glanced at the television, the black screen reflecting my outline. It sat there, waiting, as if to say, this is your role now. Old people belong at home watching me. For a moment, I almost gave in, almost picked up the remote, almost surrendered to the glow of a screen filling the space where voices used to be. But my hand stopped midair, because turning it on would have felt like admitting he was right. And I wasn't ready to do that. Not yet. Instead, I just sat there listening to a house that was too full of memories and too empty of people. I thought about how, when the kids were young, the house never knew silence. There were toys scattered in every corner, dishes clinking in the sink, footsteps pounding up and down the hallway. Even the nights had noise, the sound of whispers. Through bedroom doors, the occasional midnight cries. Back then, I used to crave quiet. I used to think, just 5 minutes of silence, please. Now, silence feels like punishment, like being locked out of life itself. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling. And in that stillness, I asked myself a question I didn't want to face. Is this it? Is this all that's left for me? No answer came. Just the hollow sound of the house breathing around me, reminding me that, whether I liked it or not, I was alone. And that silence, heavier than words, sharper than rejection, settled into my bones like it planned to state out I don't know. How long I sat there in that chair, minutes, maybe hours. Time feels strange when you're drowning in silence. But somewhere in the middle of it all, something shifted. At first, it was just a spark, a single thought that pushed through the numbness. Who the hell does he think he is? And just like that, the heaviness in my chest started to burn. Anger has a way of waking you up when sadness tries to put you to sleep. I replayed his words, again in my head, but this time, they sounded different. Not like a verdict. More like an insult I refused to accept. Old people belong at home watching TV. Really? That's what I'm reduced to? After everything? After raising him, after late nights and early mornings, after holding his feverish head against my chest, after working myself to the bone to make sure he never went without. Now my job is to rot quietly in front of a television. I laughed. A bitter, humorless laugh. Sure, I muttered under my breath. Because apparently life ends at 50-something, right? My hands clenched without me realizing. Fingernails digging into my palms, shoulders tightening. I stood up suddenly, the chair legs screeching against the floor. The sound startled even me. It was the first loud thing in the house since they'd left, and it almost felt good. I found myself pacing, moving from room to room, like I couldn't stand still anymore. The anger was fueled. In the kitchen, I opened a cupboard too hard, the door banging against the frame. The sharp sound echoed, and I thought, good. Let the walls know I'm not going to sit here quietly like some forgotten relic. I caught my reflection again in the microwave door, and this time, instead of sadness, I saw fire in my eyes. And, you know what? I liked it better, because the truth is, anger hurts, but at least it reminds you that you're still alive. I grabbed my coat, not because I had anywhere to go, but because I needed to move. I needed to prove, even if just to myself, that I wasn't the discarded afterthought he made me feel like. Old people belong at home watching TV, I said again, this time louder, mocking his words. And then I spat back into the empty house. Well, maybe old people with no backbone do. But not me. The rain had started outside, tapping against the windows, soft but steady. I pressed my hand against the glass, cold seeping into my skin, and for the first time that night I thought, maybe I don't need their invitation to feel alive. The sadness hadn't disappeared. Not at all. But it had shifted into something sharper, something I could actually use. Because if they didn't want me, fine. But I'd be damned if I let their rejection define me. The rain didn't stop me. In fact, it felt like the perfect backdrop. I slipped on my shoes, pulled the hood of my coat tight around my face, and stepped outside. The air was damp, sharp, almost cleansing, the kind that fills your lungs with something heavier than oxygen. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just walked. Down streets I'd walked 1,000 times before, past houses that had once held neighbors I knew by name, but who'd long since moved away. The rain soaked through my coat in patches, and my shoes made that sticky squeak against the wet pavement. But I welcomed it. Every sound, every sensation reminded me I wasn't just sitting lifeless on a couch. Waiting for time to pass, I found myself drifting toward places that carried pieces of my life, places I hadn't visited in years. First, the park. I stood by the old swing set where I used to push my son so high he'd shriek with laughter, shouting, "Higher, Mom! Higher!" I remember how his little fists gripped the chains, knuckles white, and how he'd always turn his head just to check I was watching. He never wanted to soar without knowing I was there. Now, the swings creaked empty, swaying slightly in the wind, and I stood there, soaked, wondering how that little boy had grown into the man who left me behind at the door. Next, the corner cafe. It used to be our Saturday ritual. Hot chocolate for the kids, coffee for me, muffins we never finished but always bought. I peeked through the window as I passed, and though the inside had changed, brighter lights, new furniture, I could almost see their small faces pressed against the glass, fogging it with breath as they scribbled little smiley faces with their fingers. Then, the bookstore. The one with the crooked shelves and that faint musty smell that clung to your clothes after you left. My son used to run straight to the comics section, sitting cross-legged on the floor as though he owned the place. I'd pretend to browse nearby, but really I just watched him, watched his world open up one colorful page at a time. Each place I passed was like a breadcrumb trail leading me back to who I was. Not just a mother, not just the old one, left at home, but someone who had lived, who had mattered, who had built entire worlds of memories brick by brick. By the time I circled back toward home, my hair was plastered to my forehead, my coat heavy with water, but my heart, felt strange. Heavy, yes, but also awake, because here's what I realized on that walk. They can try to erase me from their present, but they can never erase me from their past. I'm stitched into their story, whether they acknowledge it or not. And maybe it was time to start stitching myself into a new one. When I got back home, I peeled off my wet coat and hung it on the chair, not the closet. I didn't want to pretend anymore that I was just waiting for someone to invite me out. No, tonight had shown me exactly where I stood. I made myself a cup of tea. The steam curled up, fogging my glasses, and as I sat there holding the warm mug, I realized I was tired. Not the kind of tired that a night's sleep fixes, but the kind that builds up over years, from being overlooked, from swallowing words, from trying to prove my worth where it wasn't being seen. And that's when the thought landed, clear and sharp. If they don't want me, then maybe I should stop wanting them to want me. It sounds cold, doesn't it? Almost bitter. But it wasn't. Not really. It was survival. I thought back to the version of me that used to exist before I became mom full-time. The girl who loved sketching in the margins of notebooks, who laughed so loud her friends would shush her in the library, who once dreamed of traveling just to see how big the world really was. Somewhere along the way, she got buried under responsibility. And then, when the responsibilities grew up and walked out the door, she was left forgotten, even by herself. I set the mug down and whispered out loud, as if to make it real. I want her back. The anger from earlier hadn't left me, but now it was joined by something else, determination. A stubborn little flame that said, no more waiting. No more. Sitting quietly in the corner, hoping they'll notice me. If they don't think I belong with them, fine. I'll find where I do belong. I walked into my bedroom, pulled out a small suitcase from under the bed, and laid it open on the sheets. Not because I had a grand plan, not because I knew exactly where I was going, but because I needed to start. Folding clothes into the case felt symbolic, like I was packing away more than fabric. I was packing away years of disappointment. Years of letting my worth be defined by other people's approval. I paused, staring at the half-filled suitcase. For the first time in a long time, I felt possibility that a sunrise was breaking through the curtains, faint pink lights spilling across the floorboards. And in that quiet glow, I made myself a promise. I'm not done. I'm not finished. And I won't let anyone tell me otherwise. Not even my own son. That morning, I zipped up the suitcase. It didn't matter where I'd go just yet. What mattered was that I'd finally decided to go. I didn't run away. It wasn't some dramatic movie moment where I slammed the door behind me and never looked back. No, it was quieter than that. Softer. More deliberate. I started small. The first step was a community art class at the library. I hadn't picked up a paintbrush in decades, but something inside me whispered, try. I walked in nervous, my palms sweating like I was back in school on the first day. The room smelled of old paper and fresh acrylics, and I almost turned around and left. But then someone smiled at me, just a simple smile, and said, glad you came. Do you know how powerful those 3 words can feel when you've been invisible for so long? Glad you came. It was like being pulled out of the shadows. From there, little by little, the world started opening again. I met a group of women who gathered every Thursday at the park to walk together. They weren't much younger than me, but the way they laughed, oh, it was contagious. They told stories, they teased each other, they shared snacks halfway through the walk. And for the first time in years, I laughed without holding back, without worrying if I was too loud or too much. Then there was the gardening club. Dirt under my nails, sun on my shoulders, strangers who quickly stopped feeling like strangers. We traded seeds, recipes, even secrets. One afternoon, as we pulled weeds side by side, a woman leaned over and said, it feels good to be needed, doesn't it? And I almost cried right there in the dirt. Because yes, it did. It wasn't about filling the hole my family had left. It was about realizing there was life outside of it. That belonging didn't have to come from the people who shared my blood. It could come from the people who shared my laughter, my interests, my time. I started to notice changes in myself. My steps felt lighter. My mornings didn't drag as much. Even the mirror was kinder, not because I looked younger, but because I looked alive. Point one evening, walking back from the cafe after meeting new friends, the streetlights glowing gold. On the wet pavement, I realized something. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't dreading going home. I was carrying something with me. Voices, laughter, connection. My house didn't feel as silent when I walked through the door because I wasn't as empty anymore. And I thought, maybe this is what reclaiming your life looks like. Not some grand, sweeping transformation. Just choosing to step out. Choosing to be seen. Choosing to belong somewhere new. It didn't erase the hurt of my son's words. But it reminded me of something I had almost forgotten. That I'm more than a mother. More than a grandmother. More than someone's old person left at home. I am still me. And there are still chapters left to write. It happened on a Tuesday evening. Nothing special about the day. I'd just come back from the community garden, hands still smelling faintly of tomato vines and damp earth. The air outside had been warm, the kind that makes you linger a little longer before heading in. I dropped my bag by the door, set a kettle on the stove, and then the phone rang. For a second, I didn't even move. Hardly anyone calls me anymore. At least not on the landline. The ring sounded almost foreign, slicing through the quiet of the kitchen. I stared at it, half expecting it to stop before I could answer. But it didn't. When I finally picked it up, his voice came through. My son. There was a hesitation in it, like he wasn't sure if he'd dialed the right number. Hey, Mom. 2 words. Ordinary, but loaded. I didn't answer right away. I just held the phone to my ear, listening to the hum on the line. And for once, I wasn't scrambling for the right thing to say. I wasn't desperate to fill the silence, to prove I was still relevant. Mom? You there? He asked again. I'm here, I said finally. Calm. Steady. Not cold, but not needy either. Just present. He started rambling about the kids, about how busy they'd been, how he meant to call sooner. I let him talk. The words tumbled out, excuses wrapped in small talk. And as I listened, something hit me. I wasn't angry in that moment. I wasn't crushed either. I was detached, because the truth was, my life hadn't been waiting on this phone call. Eventually, his tone shifted. Softer. Almost uncertain. We were thinking maybe you could come with us this weekend. The kids miss you. A few months ago, those words would have lit me up like a lantern. I would have dropped everything, rushed to say yes. But now, I paused. I looked at the kettle, starting to steam on the stove. I thought about the friends I was meeting Saturday morning, the laughter I'd come to rely on, the sense of belonging I'd built for myself outside of him. Oh, I answered honestly. I'll see if I'm free. There was a silence on his end. This time, short, but noticeable. He wasn't used to me not jumping at the chance. And in that silence, I felt something shift, not just between us, but inside me. For the first time, I wasn't begging for space in his world. I was living in mine. After we hung up, I sat down with my tea, the house quiet again. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt balanced. Because here's the thing. Getting that call didn't mean I'd been wrong to feel hurt, or that everything was magically fixed. It just meant the power dynamic had changed. I wasn't waiting at the window anymore. And that felt like victory. That I've thought a lot about that night. The one when my son looked me in the eye and said, "We voted. You're not coming with us. Old people belong at home watching TV." For a while, those words lived inside me like a splinter. Small, sharp, impossible to ignore. They dug in every time I passed the empty couch, every time I stared at the television, every time the house went too quiet. But here's what I've learned since then. Splinters don't just remind you where the wound is, they also remind you to heal it. That I don't pretend that it didn't hurt. It did. It cracked something in me that I thought was unbreakable. To be dismissed by your own child. There are no easy words for that kind of sting, but pain has a strange way of pushing you toward the truth. And the truth is, I had been waiting for them to see me, to invite me, to make space for me. Waiting like my life only mattered if it was lived in their presence. Not anymore. Now, I choose where I go. I choose who I spend my time with. I choose what fills the quiet. And maybe that's the greatest gift hidden in the hurt. The reminder that my worth was never supposed to depend on someone else's vote, that I still love my son. That will never change. But I love myself too. And I've learned that loving myself sometimes means stepping out of the role I've been cast in, the quiet, aging mother waiting by the window, and stepping into my own light that I think back to the places I've rediscovered, the park, the cafe, the garden, the faces of new friends who see me as I am right now, not just as who I used to be. Those aren't replacements for family. They're additions. Proof that life doesn't shrink as you grow older. It only shrinks if you let it. The house is still quiet at night. The clock still ticks. The fridge still hums. And sometimes I still feel the ache of being left behind. But there's a difference. Now, I don't hear that silence as punishment. I hear it as space. Space to think, to create, to rest, to live. So when my son calls now, I answer. Sometimes I say yes, sometimes I say no. But either way, I don't wait for the invitation anymore. I've already chosen my place in the world, and it's not just at home, watching TV. It's out there, walking under streetlights after laughter, with friends, sipping coffee at a cafe where people wave when I walk in, standing in a garden with dirt on my hands and sun on my face. It's right here, in this moment, telling my story. Because I may be older, but I am not finished.